again, YouTube. As promised to Sandy, I'm making a video on sheath making, leather sheaths for knives, and it's just a basic sheath I'm doing for this knife, which is this one here, which I put the Zebrano handles on. It's the Mora 12C27 blank that I bought from a bushcraft supplier, should I say. And this is for a chap from Wales, and now I've got to make a sheath for it, and because it's a fairly small blade on it, I'm not using the normal thick leather that I usually use. So most of the leather I use is about 4mm thick, but for this one I'll be using well, it's averaging out at 2.5 to 3mm thick, so it's still quite chunky. And obviously for the welt I'm going to use the 4mm stuff. First step is to get a piece of fairly stiff card, something like a cereal packet would do, and then you want to fold it for a decent size. I mean, for this one it's about, how many inches is that? Nearly 5 inches, but you won't need anything quite as much as that normally. So normally 3 inch should be enough, but it's always better to have too much than too little. And on the fold, fold it back the other way as well, just so it's a nice defined line. I normally like to mark with a marker pen as well, just so I know where the centre is. And now what we need to do is get our knife, and you need to lay it on the line where the spine is, right down the middle, so that the line is directly under the centre line of the knife. And then, without marking the knife, you can mark off roughly where the outside edges come. So you don't need to do this with both sides, but I do it with both sides just for the sake of it. And then you want to roll the knife onto its side and line up the spine of the knife with those marks that I've just done. Obviously, I forgot to mention this, you need at least ½ inch all the way around the knife. It's better to have 3/4 inch, so keep that in mind. This is 3/4 inch. So what I'm going to do for safety's sake is move it up fractionally, just so there's an extra little bit of room. It doesn't. Extra room is good. You can always trim off the excess, but you can't add it on afterwards. And then you want to mark the rough shape of your sheet. Well, mark a few points out about 3/4 inch from all of the edges of the blade. Should be about there. And at the top I come out a little bit normally anyway, so that can say that, depending on how deep you want the knife to sit in the sheath. So I'm going to have this one up to about there, so that's where the top mark is. So what I'll show you is just, these are the dots. I don't know if you can, no, you can't see them on here. No, but there's a few black dots, and what I'm going to do now is join those. this 90 degrees from the centre line. Like so. So you've got your basic half sheath style, and don't forget it'll be a bit narrower than this with a fold on it as well. So, and also you need to remember the belt loop. This is a left-handed sheath, so if it's folded around like that, the belt loop has to be on this side of it. So what you do is you mark, well, you can measure how far your first marks were of the thickness of the handle to the spine, or the scales to the spine, which in this case is nearly 3/4 of an inch. So you want to mark in just over that, so this is going to go just under an inch, just under an inch for this one. So you want to add about 1/4 of an inch onto that one. Then the thickness of the belt loop, which in this case is going to be 1.5 inches, like so, and then take those lines straight up from your horizontal line. So you end up with something like that. Now what you do is you fold the card over and you cut this shape out as accurately as you can. It's not amazingly, you don't have to have amazingly smooth edges, as long as when you transfer it to the leather you smooth out the edges. And you'll have roughly a cardboard sheath. Now I'm going to trim this off because this is only a one-off knife, and if I want to make a right-handed sheath I can fold it around that way or turn it over when you draw onto the leather, same thing. Now at this point you want to trial fit your knife inside it. Now I can see that I've made this part too thick, too wide on here, so I'm going to take that up a little bit thinner and shape the edge a little bit more. Okay, now you need to transfer this design to your piece of leather, which I shall do for you now. I'll just tidy up and be back with you shortly. Back again. What I forgot to mention, obviously, is when you make the template, make sure you've got a long enough loop to make the belt loop on it. Vary in lengths. I mean, this one's about 6 inches long, so it depends how low you want the sheath to hang, really. Right, then marking it onto the leather, you need to get your leather, make sure it's big enough, obviously. Check to see if there's any damage on the face of the leather, and if there is, try and avoid it. If not, it's not the end of the world. It's a handmade knife sheath. So then you want to find the most efficient way to cut your sheath out of it, and for me that is going to be right down in this corner here. So I've only got that corner that's total waste, a little strip off of here which I can use for making into a bracelet or something like that, and then the rest I can use for other sheaths. So on here you need to transfer the design onto it from the template, back of the leather, sorry, which will be the inside. And also, when you mark the sheath, you want to mark where the centre lines are as well, where the fold line will be, and you'll see why in a moment. Alright, now before you cut it out, use a ruler to line up those two centre lines, and about just over ½ inch up the thickness of the width of your welt, I'm going to make a little mark there. And that's going to be, well, I should get to that in a minute. Okay, now we need to cut this out, and because this is only fairly thin, pliable leather, I'm just going to use a pair of scissors for this. I normally use a sharp knife. Box cutter will do the job, or a craft knife. As long as it's nice and sharp and it makes a clean cut on the leather safely, that's all that matters. But as I say, this is thin leather, so a nice sharp pair of scissors will do fine. Right. Now the next step is you want to make the welt, which is the piece of leather that fits all the way down the edge, so that it's sandwiched between the two pieces. When the knife's in it, it stops the blade cutting through the threads, or reduces the chances. Also a good time to double check and make sure that your knife will fit. There's nothing worse than wasting a lot of time making a sheath and finding out it's no good. Right. Now here is another sheath that ended up too small, so I may be able to get a piece out of that.
They're quiet, they're eating. Thank you very much.
Just about. Right, so I'm going to draw around this, the edge of this sheath again. Now you want to go all the way past the centre point at the bottom of the sheath. I'll show you what sort of, I'll mark where the centre is on this. Okay. Right, that's the line there. That's where the centre of the sheath was, the original one, and you want to carry it on about an inch past that, or if you haven't got an inch, as long as it's, I'd say, somewhere between quarter an inch and half an inch, something like that, maybe a third of an inch, then that'll give you enough to finish off the end neatly. If you stop dead, then the sheath will look a bit odd at that point, it won't match properly. And I'll get to that. Again, it's easier if you sort of watch the whole video through and see exactly why certain things are done during the process of making it, rather than me trying to explain to you as I'm doing them, because I can actually show you properly then. So that's the shape, the piece we want to cut out, that little narrow piece. Get rid of this out of the way again. Right, and because this is a slightly thicker leather, this one, or quite a lot thicker, I need to use my knife to cut it out with. Now the faces of this don't need to be too neat. As you can see, there's bits of leather dye on there and the back, because that'll be hidden by the sheath, and the edge is a bit that'll be seen. So get the knife. Okay, so that's the welt that is going to go into this over there. That's going to go into the edge of the sheath between the two. Now this piece, what we're going to do here is we're going to drill a hole where that mark is, which is just a little bit higher up than where the thickness of the welt is, drill a hole in there, and it needs to be at least the thickness of the welt. So, and this is about a 4, maybe 4.5 mil thick piece of leather. So what I'm going to do is drill a 4.5 mil hole, and which should be enough for this, through there, and then you need to create a slit from the hole down to the bottom of the sheath, right down the middle. Okay, I'll do that now. Like so. Right, there you go. That's the slot in the bottom. Now this is so that when you come to glue your welt into the sheath, it'll actually go through the hole. Let me fold this round properly. Get it all lined up. It's a lot easier when you're actually gluing it together, believe it or not. Try and get all this lined up as much as possible. So it'll actually stick out the back of the sheath like that, and then you trim this off and then sand it flat, and that gives you a nice neat finish and protection all the way over the point of the blade. So if you ended it early, then there's a chance that if you push on the top of the blade with it in the sheath, that the tip of the blade would go that side of the welt and sort of wedge itself out and come through the drain hole, if that makes sense. Before we can do any more, we need to dye the inside surface of the sheath, because you won't be able to do that when it's all glued together, or not. You wouldn't be able to get right to the bottom. And on top of the dye, I waterproof it with a paraffin wax, which is what they use for waterproofing wax jackets, barber jackets and things like that. So dye the inside, making sure you leave the gap right around the edge for the glue to adhere properly. And also I like to dye the back edge as well, of at least where the inside of the belt loop will be, because again that's something else you won't be able to dye when it's riveted down. But what I'll do first is I'll trim the edges of the belt loop so it's not just a square edge straight on top of the sheath. Gives it a little bit neater look. And then I think we're about ready to get going with that. Obviously the belt loop needs riveting before you glue and stitch the sheath together, because to rivet it you need to hammer down on top of it, like have one edge on a solid surface, like an anvil or a mini anvil, whatever, to hold the back of the rivet as you strike it. So I shall get on with that. Getting on to the dyeing of the inside first. So what you'll need is a spray bottle. This one's from Poundland, so obviously a pound, with water in, and some leather dye. I use fiblings, or fibings, sorry. Can't really see that bottle, but any leather dye will work, as long as it's a good quality one, obviously. And a cloth. I mean, I've got a cloth in there as well. Right, now I'll show you also latex gloves. They sell these in Poundland as well, because leather dye takes ages to come off your hands. Right, follow the instructions on your on the leather dye, whichever one you get in the end. But with the one I use, you have to wet the surface of the leather down first. See if we can get this. Now, it doesn't have to be super soaked, but as long as it's moist. Now what you want to do is apply the dye using the swab provided, and after you've put the dye on, because it'll be quite excessive at first, then use your cotton rag to wipe it all over and you get a more even coat. This is more important on the outside of the sheath than the inside. Partly because the inside of the sheath absorbs quite a lot of the dye as you're putting it on, so you don't get a chance to move it around at all, and it's all going to be, well, mostly going to be hidden anyway. So and also, while you're doing this, you want to do the inside of the welt, only the very inside edge, or what will be the inside edge on the when it's on the sheath. Like so. That's enough. Plenty there. Now we've got to let those dry, and I shall get back to you then.